Kira Shishkin. Thank you so much for coming on the Edison podcast today.
Thank you very much for having me.
I want to get into your new thing that you've built out, but first I want, which is informed.now. But my question before we get into any of that stuff, has your background always been in information or building, webs, that kind of stuff? Because this is a SMS information that comes to you, I assume, daily. Is this something you've always been into, news and stuff, or how'd you get into this?
Totally, not really. My career has sort of spanned across kind of a whole range of things. Information media is new to me and is not an area that I sort of developed a huge background in. I've had some experiences working in as an executive director of a think tank that's focused on a lot of similar information kind of areas as what we're doing now with informed.now. But no, it's a whole new realm for me. We're in our second year of building this venture. And my background is, my why behind this is much more personal than it is a professional background.
And why is it a personal why?
Yeah, totally. So I was born and raised in Ukraine, and then came of age, spent my young kind of adolescence, young adulthood in Israel before coming to the United States, and just seeing over and over again how the roots of conflict wind up being information conflict. I'm kind of encountered again and again with this realization that information purity and the quality of information that people get to consume, especially news related, really, really matters. And it has been broken as an industry, as a practice. It's been broken for very many years. And so seeing the same story play out with news being broken in Ukraine, in Israel, now in the United States, I want to do something about it. And that was the impetus, the spirit behind informed.now, which is a desire to, create a news source, an information source that isn't trying to manipulate you.
And good, because you said purity, because there hasn't been purity for a long time. I forget what lawsuit it was that basically stated that they didn't have to tell the truth, and they haven't been telling the. I just tell me the facts. Let me make up my idea of what it is and my own thing. Don't try to skew me a certain way. And that's the same on every news channel. It's skewed the way that they want. That person wants to hear, so they think that they're right. I don't want to be right. I want to know what truly is going on so I can make the educated decision of how to go forward. And that's why I do podcasts, because I can ask you questions that my wife used to grab my leg at a dinner table and tell me to shut up, because I want to know why people do the things they do. And I don't, and whether it's voting, this, that, whatever it is, I want to know. It doesn't mean I don't like you. I cannot agree with you and still like you. That's how it's supposed to be. But for some reason, in this United States of America, we'll just leave it with us, that it's not that way anymore. You have part of the country, I say a third, that, and some of that third, that if you don't believe the same way they do, they want nothing to do with you. And that's not how it should be. It should be about,
Totally.
Yeah. So I totally get what you're trying to do there with the news purity, because when I went on the Camino de Santiago and I did that walk, I was watching many different stations, and it was just the news. It was just, here's the information. Make up your own idea.
Totally. I think what you're hinting at is what we call the hyperpolarization of the United States. And when you think of that problem, and now it's in front of our face, we can feel it. We can tell that, at a dinner table conversation with family, it's hard to talk about politics, it's hard to talk about news. In the workplace, it's taboo. Going out in a bar or, just having your own social life outside of those environments, politics are no longer welcome. Conversation of current affairs is no longer welcome because we can no longer handle it. This isn't something that, exists innately. It's been manufactured by the news ecosystem that strives to agonize us against the other side and further reassure us into our own echo chamber. And that's happened with social media, but also with traditional legacy news media for so long now, that all the infrastructure that carries information, all the information plumbing of the United States, is designed to drive us further and further apart from each other, create fear, create anger, and create isolation or hyperpolarization ultimately. And we're here to offer an alternative, a source of information that empowers you to make up your own mind without being told how to feel or what to think about any given issue.
Well, I mean, the way to have you to control somebody is to get them to hate each other, so that you can control what's going on, and they're focused on each other instead of focus on what you're doing. I mean, if you don't believe that, look at the fraud that's happened in the United States and Ukraine, and Minnesota, all those different places that it's happened recently. That's because they're looking over here instead of looking at what they're doing. And it's always, I always says in the past, when someone's telling you how bad you are, that's their projection onto you, and that's exactly that's who they are. So that one group who's trying to tell you how bad you are and everything else, they're the ones doing all the stuff that they say they're doing. And here's the thing: in the United States or anywhere, I interview so many people, most of us are in the middle. I'd say 99% of us are in the middle. It didn't matter what party it is. There's just a 0.5% on each side that are so loud that you think it's really that way. And if you ignore that, you'll understand.
Totally. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And really there is, there is no right answer in a sense of like, oh, if you're, super left or super right or super up or super down, doesn't really matter. The sort of sensationalism and this like polarized storytelling that's going on is making losers of all of us. And it's just a real shame, because I think we have a lot more in common than we have apart, and we have different. And it's so unfortunate that a media ecosystem that we inherit and that we sort of operate within these days is designed to mislead us ultimately, to trigger, to agonize, to really cause an emotional response, but not to just inform and step away. So that's the problem that we're solving with informed.now.
And when did you start informed.now?
We're in our second year now, so we're coming up at 2 years soon.
How do you get the feeds? How do you get the information for the feeds?
Yeah, I mean, the most important is we're doing something so obvious that people sort of also forgotten can be done and should be done, which is we look at primary sources. So something north of 80% of our news coverage comes directly from primary sources, meaning these aren't, journalists that are telling stories of how to feel, how to think, and we're trying to then triangulate and de-noise, de-bias, and de-storytell those news. Instead, we go directly to primary sources. And so for the issues that we focus on, which are large-scale world news that impact the everyday person, we look at the primary sources that sort of are the prime movers of those news. So what does that mean literally? It can be central banks, governments, public companies, various official organizations, folks that are actually publishing the information firsthand, instead of people that are retelling that story in big media. So a very tangible example of that is when unemployment numbers change or are published, when census numbers, when inflation numbers, when things of that nature, that scale are published, they're published by very specific bureaus in the United States. It's either the Federal Reserve, or it is Census Bureau, Bureau of Economic Analysis, Bureau of Labor Statistics. These are the prime sort of publishers of this information. And most people, when they think of inflation numbers, they think of going to CNBC, because they've kind of like monopolized that piece of information. And they are very early to report, they're very loud to report. Their rankings in search and everywhere is higher than obviously a government agency. And so people think, oh, that's where the information comes from. CNBC does not publish unemployment or inflation numbers, right? They're just another storyteller around it. We go directly to the source, right? And we have our own proprietary hooks and connections with the universe of primary sources across the world, official sources, governments, central banks, agencies of that nature. And that's where we collect information. And for 80% of the time, we're able to find our own path to the primary source, such that we're not reliant on any other storyteller to try to triangulate what's actually going on.
Did you get that? There's your timer telling you. So it's informed now. And
Yeah.
is it because I went there just now, and get your news and text, no bias, clickbait or ad start. I guess it's like a way to sign up or whatever. The question, I mean, you get the information because I know where all this stuff comes, because I do a morning show and I talk about all the stuff that you talked about, the inflation numbers, all that kind of stuff. And I use AI to go get me the information, and I put it together in a nice little daily thing as I talk about, which before I would, go to certain sources and, that to get it, but now I can get it like you just said. And I know that the numbers are, because it's true. My problem is a lot of this government numbers, please don't get it wrong, like the BLS report has been wrong so many times, it's ridiculous. I call it the Bureau of Alliance Statistics, because what you see on ADP and all these other things for unemployment are usually more accurate. The problem with the Bureau of Labor Statistics is it has not been accurate, and they need to fix that and figure out what the problem is. But the problem is, one of them is, one's a phone call. Are you working or not working? And that's a problem, and who's answering the phones, and those kind of things. And people understand that what makes up all these different things, that they go to, like you said, CNBC, or what they used to do, the newspaper, to find that information when there's other places to get it from.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned ADP, because we do think a lot of the private employers like Intuit, ADP actually have a lot of really valuable information around kind of the state of the world, and we do also monitor them. When we look at a source or an announcement or any sort of like prime mover news, we don't ever say, okay, this is how the world is, right? This is the truth, this is the fact. What we say is like, hey, the Census Bureau reports the following information, right? And then it's up to you whether you believe that information, whether that's credible to you. You need to be aware of it either way, right? Because that is sort of one of the benchmarks that we have in
Right.
our society, in our culture. But we don't ever say, just because the White House announces this, therefore this is the state of the world. So there's a good amount of distance that we keep when it comes to procuring the right information, surfacing in the right way, but also not suggesting that this is the end all be all description of the world. So we are always sort of attributing information to sources, reporting the sources, but don't insist or really even in any way recommend the validity of this information. We say, hey, this is what has been said, right? It's up to you, Ed, or the reader, to decide to believe that or not.
So I have a question for you. So, like, when you sign up and it says, when do you want your news? 8 o'clock Eastern time, which is where I'm in California. That's 5 a.m. But my question is, a lot of the news that I focus on, the financial news, comes out at like 6 Eastern, you know what I mean? At my time, which is later in the day, or certain things like that. Do you keep updating the feed to that person throughout the day, or do they have to wait till the next day to get all that information?
Yeah, so we send SMS updates. Like our specific niche and our category that we're pioneering and leading is news by SMS. So this isn't the same thing as having, an app or a web feed or some sort of an RSS where it's just a constant stream of information that's being scraped from the internet. We do a lot of those types of motions of reading in an automated way as well, a huge amount of information. But ultimately, our service comes through in the responsibility that we take for the content, right? So we always have a human expert research team that's looking at everything, all the information. And when we publish it through SMS, we send you one SMS per day in the morning. It is, we put our whole reputational, brand on the line, and we say every day, every morning, with every character that's in that SMS, we take responsibility, right? We take responsibility for the accuracy, for the fidelity, for the cross-checking, the fact-checking. And if we can't do that, then of course we're no better than, asking a prompt saying, hey, tell me the news, AI. We don't believe in that. And we've seen consistently across many benchmark studies that AI is not good at factual information, because AI does not reason. And it really struggles with news content specifically. So we're not another kind of like perplexity prompter for getting news. We maintain the efficiency of a technology company with the credibility of a media company. and our readers know that and value that specifically about us, is that the texts they get from us every morning are, you know, we're accountable for.
Right. My question was, so you get that text. If I want to know more financial news and the stuff that's coming out later, do you still send that out, or I have to wait till the next day? That's my question.
Yeah,
You
sorry for
sound like a politician there for a second because you kept going on and on instead of answering my question. My question is, if I set up that I want to get my text in the morning at 8 o'clock Eastern, and there's other news that come out at 10, I don't get that. Do you go, okay, I gave you your first morning, but here's an update in the day of other numbers that come out, or do I have to get all that information the following day? Are you following me?
Yeah, the following day. Totally understand your question. Just I need to give you some kind of background context to how we
That's not
operate.
what I was asking you. I wanted to understand how the process works, because I need to know certain numbers by 8:30 my time, which is 11:30 Eastern time. Because
Yeah,
that's by the time I sit down and I do my daily show, I have all the numbers that came out except for maybe the 10-year bond auctions or the 30-year bond auction. But the question is there a way to get financial news only, or is there a way to get, because when I signed up, as you can tell, I didn't get anything yet because I haven't looked at my phone because we're talking. The question, can I get certain news, or do I get everything that you guys decide that's important?
yeah, totally. So it is only a single text in the morning. There are no breaking news or update news throughout the day. So the next update comes the next morning. The reasoning behind that is that a lot of people, and the person that we build for, is actually experiencing news fatigue and information overload. Not an absence or a lack of information, but having way too much thrown at them. And so what we pioneer in this approach is news minimalism, where if you only had 30 seconds this morning to read the news, what's going to make that cut? And we're not going to keep bombarding you with updates, information, etc., until the next morning. Now, it may sound like very minimal, purposefully, but because we send it every single morning, it becomes more of a habit. It's not something that you're catching up to, like doing 3 hours of research, etc. Because it becomes part of your day each morning, you actually wind up being a lot of information on an ongoing basis. Now, your question around the themes, we focus specifically on what we call world-changing world news, and that cuts across many different domains: economics, politics, policy, healthcare, technology, science, military, war and peace, uh, culture, society. It cuts across all these domains that we deem world-changing or life-changing for millions of people. And so currently our flagship product is geared towards the specific curation that isn't finance specific, although there's a lot of finance in it, isn't politically specific, although there's a lot of politics in it. It cuts, or rather it prioritizes based on significance, but across many different domains.
So who picks what I see?
So you don't pick what you see. It is
Right.
not
I
designed
said,
to
who
be
does?
customized.
Who
Yeah,
does?
it's not designed to be customized. We pick what you see. We have an approach to curating the information based on significance, and so
But how do you recognize what significance is? Here, I'm taking the other side, because now not only do you control what I see, it's what you think is significant, and you being the
totally,
company, right? And then my
yeah,
question is, who makes that decision in your company? What I see on this feed?
totally. Um, the type of reader that we attract is somebody who wants to see the most significant,
And
like
what
big changes.
define that?
Yeah,
You keep
I'll
saying the
answer
word
that. Yeah,
significant. Yeah, yeah. Defines
yeah.
what that
Let me
means.
let me answer that. Yeah. It's a great push. So I'm just starting by saying significance is like what we prioritize, and I'll define significance for us. We are not the kind of place for deep dives or thematic specific content. We specifically look at like world changing phenomenon. Now, how do we define significance and world changing? It isn't a decision that's made by one person, and it isn't automated. It's a hybrid of our technology and our team deciding, always optimizing for significance. Significance comes down to two things. It's how much does this event or action change the lives of how many people? What are breaking that down further? We're looking at scales and differences in sort of events at the scales of millions of people. We're not looking at local accidents, right? If there's a car crash in Minnesota, it's a tragic thing, but you're not going to hear that from us. We don't focus on local, kind of hyper local situations. So we're looking at the scales of hundreds of thousands and millions of people affected. And affected how? Or what needs to be changing their life? It typically changes in freedom, in security, in optionality, in peace, in stress levels, in culture, and in healthcare. I mean, it's things that really undeniably affect large populations, right? So if there's a war, an economic shift, new wave of tariffs, if there is hyperinflation. There are things that are undeniably going to change the lives of millions of households, millions of families, millions of people. That's the type of scale of news that we look at. And that's what is significant.
All right, and then how does this who picks the significance? Is it an AI? Is it algorithm? How is it based off of what? So you go, okay, we saw this feed. Let's put this feed in there. Did you guys make that decision, or is it made by, like I said, artificial intelligence? How does it decide what you guys send out to me?
Yeah, there are many layers. Yeah, there are many layers that include our technology. We have purpose-built tech that enables us to read more than a human team ever could. But then there's also layers of human review, each of which is designed not to have an editorial input of like, here's what we think is important, here's what Ed needs to read, but it's designed to very purely prioritize this, so to speak, approach that we have, where you can generally call utilitarianism, or is like, is how many people are affected by how much. And everything that we do is a mix of both our tech and our people, layers of decisions across our people, is specifically just prioritizing significance. So it's a loyalty to an approach.
So all right. So you still truly didn't answer who picks it for me, and I'm trying to understand. So when you get these things that come in, and there's these 10 different stories, eight of them are significant where they're going to affect 100,000 or more. That is where who finds that out that that's going to be significant enough to affect that many people? Who makes that decision in sending that out to me at 8 a.m. Eastern time in the morning?
Yeah, I mean, so as I mentioned, it's sort of a couple of layers of
But layers, I hear that. But who? Actual individual people? Or is it?
yes,
That's on. Okay,
yes.
that's on. So it comes in. I'm trying to understand the whole process. Sorry, Kira. I'm trying to, because when you say bias free, that means there should be no bias, right? That's what that should mean. But when I think you mean bias free, you mean when I'm telling you a story, I'm telling you my take on the story. But when you're feeding me certain stories, you are picking and choosing what stories I can see instead of giving me everything.
But giving people everything has never been an option. It's never been an option across any media because the amount of things that are happening in the world is insurmountable at any given moment, right? The amount of information that we consume, digest, and see through, it is impossible to translate all of that to the end user. The end user has no time, no attention span, and no bandwidth to deal with the entirety of the world's knowledge at any given second. Even when we were narrowed down to just current affairs and news, the volume that we're speaking about is far beyond the capacity of even 100 people to digest efficiently. So there isn't an editorial, so to speak. There isn't an editorial bias around like, hey, here's what I think is important. Therefore, there is an approach saying, hey, we focus on these significant changes. And everything that we do is try to curate to that specific model. If you subscribe to this model that I mentioned around, big life changes across scales of millions of people, then you would be a good reader for Informed. We're not obviously trying to please everyone. It's impossible to do so. The people that we attract, the people that we serve, are folks that want to have the most minimal 30-second briefing on the state of the world. And everything that we do across technology and across our people is optimizing to kind of honor that filter.
Right. So it's not bias free. It's by the bias towards the amount of people that it affects. And the reason I say that, because people say everything's biased. Well, it's like morals. People say that guy doesn't have morals. He has morals. He just doesn't have the same morals as you. And so when people say things aren't biased, it's not true. It's like people are prejudiced. We're all prejudiced. We like certain things, but we're not all racist. That's the difference. And so what I'm hearing is the stories that you find, you guys think that these will affect 100,000 people or more, because that's what again, it's humans picking. There's a sense of going to be bias in humans picking in the first place, just like because that's innate in us and who we are. And you're saying that the average person can't absorb that much news. Well, a lot of people can't, but some of us can. Some of us need that news because we're trying to do other things and talk to people. So when I do my morning show, I go through all the stuff out there and I find the things that I think is the most important to the market I'm talking to. And that's what you did. But I get it all in, and then I tell everybody what I think is important. But there's a lot more news that's just as important than what I'm telling you. That's just what I think is going to affect you for that day. That's what you guys are doing with your system. Is you think that this is what there's this news that came out. We think this is significant enough to where it will affect enough people, and send that out to everybody. And that's what I'm hearing. That's what you do, basically.
Yeah, at a scale of the entirety of the world, right? Which is why when I say the volume is not manageable, is because we're not looking at like financial news in the Midwest, right? Or financial news for commodities trading. We're looking at all of that and across the entirety of the world on a 24/7 basis, right? So all that we do is consume, digest, analyze news, and the amount of volume that we see is really, there's enough to, there's too much of everything for everyone, and there isn't a person that can handle all of that. There isn't a reader that can possibly read even a fraction of all that. The scale that we're looking at is very, very high level, or should I say, it's not, what would be helpful to an investor, or what would be helpful to a real estate operator, or what would be helpful to, a healthcare practitioner. It's not in any way tailored in that way. It is what affects the everyday person, no matter who they are. And that winds up being really, really big scale news, which actually is a pretty, it's a pretty narrow category, right? There's a lot of things that are happening that are affecting hundreds of thousands of people, and that's going to be hard to choose. But there are a few things happening every single day that inevitably affect billions of people or millions of people. And that's the category that we play in, is like that scale of news, which is, I think, in some ways actually easier to pick, because there's a huge competition for what's newsworthy at lower levels. But at the highest of levels, there's really only about 5 to 10 stories per day, or events per day, that are going to have impact at the scale of billions.
Kira, what should I have asked you today that I didn't ask you? Because I'm sorry, I wasn't trying to be mean to you or rude to you. I was trying to get to the answer that I could understand. So
No, for sure. I was internalizing your question.
No, I meant earlier in my statement to what we were talking about earlier. When I'm trying to understand exactly how you guys do it and everything else, it's just so that we can understand, because there's a lot of issues with news and who gives it to you and whatever. There's always, it's like the news on Fox and the news on CNN, if that's even news, on those two, that it's skewed one way towards the people that their perfect their perfect client or avatar. That's what the news is skewed to. Your news is what I'm hearing is skewed to a person who's busy, who just wants to know what the the most important thing is that's going to affect the whole world at one time. Because first you said hundreds of, but really you're saying millions of people. So it's really a world news versus local news or regional news.
Exactly. I mentioned 100,000 because like you're never going to hear about anything that's less than that. But typically, the scale we're looking at is way bigger than hundreds of thousands. And I think you just painted it, very much more accurately. Is that we're serving the person who is tired of being manipulated, is tired of being kind of told, is tired of being influenced. And it's not every single person out there. Some people are perfectly happy reading Fox, watching CNN. And I love that you brought those two into the conversation because I think they're both cut of the same cloth. They sensationalize, they storytell. It doesn't matter which one you're consuming. They're both extremely corrupt and really like morally bankrupt, right? And so,
well, one more than the other, because at least one of them has the other side on there, where one doesn't have both sides on ever. So that's the difference. When you only have one side on a news station or some of these shows, they're biased one way. Well, that's not how it's supposed to be. You're supposed to have both parties on. That's why the only thing I watch, and please don't, this is going to offend somebody, but it is on Fox and it's called the Five. They talk a certain way, and they got libertarians who are on there, and they have a Democrat who's on there, plus they have Republicans. They all talk a story in a certain way, and it makes more sense because everybody's different, and that's how it should be. Where a lot of these places, they don't do that. It's either everybody has to agree or you can't be on the show, and that makes no news at all. That just makes, here's my editorial.
Totally. Yeah. No, I couldn't agree more. I think the amount of creative storytelling that has fully absorbed news by now is really unfortunate, which is why we're building what we're building, is for folks to make up their own mind without being told, hey, this is a terrible thing, or this is a great thing. Trump is the worst. Trump is the best. Whatever the question, the question is, there's always the suggestion of perspective. And I think maybe to your earlier question of like, what have you not asked me that I wish you did, is the way that we write and the way that we publish information is extremely minimal. So I kind of believe that there is a certain critical length of a text after a certain point. If it goes longer than this many words, this many paragraphs, it becomes inevitable to introduce bias. Right. So it's actually about brevity sometimes that puts us in a category that we play in. Right. When we talk about saying our news is unbiased, our news is objective, people always rub them the wrong way. It's like, what are you talking about? There is no such thing as unbiased news. There's no such a thing as objective news. We say not at a length that you're used to, not at a length of, seeing a long article with many paragraphs, images in the middle, all these side interviews, at the length that people are used to consuming news. There is always going to be bias. There's always going to be some sort of perspective. But we do news in a very different way. The length of us telling you about a certain story, about a certain development, is actually going to be probably 2 to 3 sentences, more likely closer to 2 than to 3. And so what we do essentially is report the fact base that is confirmed and cross-checked across all the different sides of what we know to be truth, like what we know to be commonly agreed upon now. But we don't go any further beyond those, bare bone facts of telling you this is a great thing, this is a terrible thing. That's up to you. And we stick to that length because of this kind of philosophical alignment of any more than reporting the facts is no longer news. That becomes news commentary.
Gotcha. Kira, thank you so much for being on the show today. I really appreciate you being here and telling what you guys are trying to do with the informed.now. I did sign up. I'll check it out and see what I think about it. I get my news in many different places. And it's mainly financial news. It has to do with homes, has to do with inflation, all that stuff. And the reason I bring that up is because when inflation happened, and they kept saying there's inflation. Well, unless you were 50 and older, you had no idea what inflation was, or in a different country, came from a different country, because most people in the United States, they weren't, the young people had no idea what inflation was, and so they didn't understand what the problem was when prices were going up, and the fact that they never come back down, they stay at that new number. And so it's important to get that news out there so people understand what that is and explain to them what's happening. So again, thank you so much for coming on the show today. How do people find you besides go to informed.now? Are you on
Yeah.
LinkedIn or anywhere else?
Yeah, informed.now is the best place to learn more about our mission of news minimalism and how to be efficient with information consumption. Our brand name is also our website, so informed.now. I'm reachable across all socials. LinkedIn is great. Any other socials you can find me on, Kira Shishkin. I'm very friendly on and always keen to chat about our mission, what we're building, and how we kind of see the media world evolving towards more signal and less noise.
All right. Thanks again for being on the show today. I really appreciate it, sir.
Thank you, Ed.